just how it works. That's why I never get into, is Dansby Swanson overpaid? That's not relevant. Every free agent is essentially overpaid.
Welcome to Northside Territory, the Chicago Cubs podcast on the Foul Territory Network. I am Patrick Mooney of The Athletic. My co-host and colleague on the Cubs beat, Sahadev Sharma, is on vacation, so we have a very special guest in Jesse Rogers of ESPN. Jesse works non-stop. He breaks national news. He writes for ESPN.com. He's on TV, as well as the ESPN 1000 affiliate here in Chicago. We sit next to each other in the Wrigley Field press box. It's a lot of laughs, but I'm always impressed by the nuggets and insights that Jesse gets as someone who is always talking to scouts, agents, executives, coaches, and opposing managers. He never has a bad take. I'm going to have to disagree with Craig Counsell on that one. So our understanding is that the Cubs are not going to be buyers at the trade deadline. Ken Rosenthal, Will Salmon, and I reported that as part of our trade deadline watch on The Athletic. So I wanted to hear from Jesse on what a sell-off could look like, what the front office and ownership must be thinking at this moment, and if there's something off in this clubhouse mix. And what exactly is Craig Counsell doing this year? Jesse, thanks for joining me here today. I mean, you are a national newsbreaker, a local authority, a multimedia talent, but basically you're here because this was pitched as a roast of Sahadev Sharma. So let's start there. This is your platform to tell the world about our boy Spin Rate.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to start with that nickname. This is a man that dives into baseball savant and true media like no one else. So, if you need a technical question asked of the manager about spin rate or velocity, it's Sahadev's job. That we've dubbed him, or bunts for that matter. He liked to ask Ross about bunting a lot. So spin rate's our guy. I love him.
Well, he's taken a much needed, well-deserved vacation. So appreciate you hopping in here. And I always like to get your take because you do a great job of going to the other clubhouse, talking to different agents, players on our teams, coaches. We're approaching the trade deadline once again. What's kind of your just overall view of the marketplace and what maybe a sell-off, could look like at Wrigley Field this summer?
Yeah, it certainly has become a seller's market in July with this third wild card added. It might make for less trades in some sense because there's so many teams in it. But obviously, if you are a seller, you can do well. And if you talk about the White Sox, for example, they could do really well.
Yeah.
In part because of some of the pieces they have. But the other thing, and this could apply to the Cubs as well, is the motivated teams. Like you have the Dodgers, you have the Yankees, even the Phillies, who look invincible, are probably going to add. So these are teams that can take on payroll. In some cases, have good farm systems. Certainly in the Dodgers case, they do. So I think that my saying is always, if you're going to have a bad year, you have to salvage it somehow. In July, in this case, July 30th is a time every year. In this case, July 30th this year is a time to salvage it. And for this Cubs wholly underachieving season, maybe they can trade David Robertson for a Ben Brown again. That type of deal. You have to get something out of it if you don't think you can win the World Series, and certainly or even get in. Fangraphs and Baseball Reference don't give them much of a percentage. Vegas doesn't either. So, I think that you have to turn your eye that way and know that it is a seller's market and get a good prospect or two.
But what was Jed's line in 2021 when we were in DC on the Zoom there? Like, don't let a crisis go to waste or something like that. And I don't know how many great pieces they have to sell. I mean, Tyone's the one name that's been kind of popping up here and there. I mean, who do you think is kind of circling the Cubs at this point and kind of wondering what they might do?
Yeah, I think the most realistic thing would be a couple of those relievers. Mark Leiter Jr. Mark Leiter Jr. would be at the top of that list. All the contenders are looking at him in particular. Really good against lefties. If you don't overuse him, there's no reason to think that he can't continue on. They're looking at Hector Neris, but a little bit more complicated with that team option that turns into a player option.
Right.
I mean, Tyson Miller. I mean, go through the list. It's been a decent bullpen over the last month. So those would be the most realistic deals. Now, the bigger deals would be Christopher Morel or Nico Horner or Jameson Taillon, someone under contract that has nothing to do with this season. It would more have to do with rejiggering your roster for the future. The other one obviously is Cody Bellinger, but his injury and his contract status make that complicated as well. So it just depends on how aggressive Jed wants to go and sort of changing up his team. And I think he needs to look at all options because this season has been such a disappointment so far.
I mean, we've known Jed for such a long time, and you've gotten to know so many executives at the highest levels of the sport in your role at ESPN. Like, what is kind of the perception of Jed as a deal maker? And I think back to, you had a great line. I think it was on Waddle and Sylvie of like, you were told sort of like if I get it right, the White Sox are a mid-market team that operates like a small market team, and the Cubs are a big market team that operates like a mid-market team. And now that kind of goes all the way to the top. But just Jed, as a player kind of in this industry, what is kind of the read on him from his colleagues and peers?
Yeah, that line, by the way, was told to me by another executive. I didn't make that line up.
Okay, yeah.
So just to be clear, that's what the industry thinks of the Chicago teams, or at least one person. You can't say you can't blanket the whole industry. But I think this won't surprise anybody. I think people around the league think Jed's a solid executive. Yeah. There are some executives, and I think I would put Jed in this class. They never want to lose a deal. Now I know that's an obvious statement. Who wants to lose a deal? But his sort of default position is that. I mean, we saw that with Cody Bellinger and guys sort of the market coming back to him on several players.
Showed him.
The one thing I did say early on, and I think this rings true, is I think it's going to be interesting to watch the New York Mets with kind of a guy like David Stearns combined with an aggressive owner like Steve Cohen. Mm-hmm. I think that will work eventually. I like that idea of opposing views. I'm not sure the Cubs have enough of the aggressive opposing view. Carter is kind of in line with Jed, who's in line with Tom. Now that is good and healthy for your organization. Again, who wants to lose deals? But this is an irrational sport which rewards players at an age that maybe they shouldn't be rewarded but that's just how it works. That's why I never get into, is Dansby Swanson overpaid? That's not relevant. Because every free agent is essentially overpaid in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
They should all be paid at 24 years old, not 29. But that's just how the system works. And, once in a while, you just have to extend yourself, even if the back end is going to be problematic. We've seen this with John Melton. And if there is a sort of vibe to Jed outside the organization, it's just exactly that. He's not going to necessarily extend himself the way Theo has, and his reputation and how that was developed. So, but Jed has a solid reputation. That'd be the one little thing, which again is maybe a reason they haven't signed up a big time free agent, since he took over.
Well, I got to give you credit, man, because you, in your role at ESPN, are on the road in October a lot, and like you're getting a good perspective that's not just the Wrigley bubble. And that's feels like whenever you come back off those trips, you're like, where's the stars? You need stars because you see those guys performing in October. And I think that's kind of what this is setting up, right? Like, can Jed land a star? I realize there's not like, a store or like an app you can just go get one. Yeah. But this offense, to me, we sit next to each other at Wrigley. That's the missing piece, right? I mean, how do you see this unfolding?
Yeah, the way I think we all agree, including Jed, that stars win you championships, right?
Yeah.
And that's an obvious statement. But it also, the lack of stars can hide some weaknesses. And what I'm getting at is, and I've said this often this year, like they were 6th in scoring last year, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't cry too much in the offseason about lack of stars, because there are times where a solid 9-man lineup can get the job done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's different ways there's different paths. But what I think happened is just so big. So one year you can be 6th in scoring, and the next year you can be 23rd.
Yeah.
If you have anchors in the middle of that lineup, that variance won't be as large. You can kind of count on things a little bit more. You know, you're not there's more 75 percentile or greater results instead of this 10% to 90%, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, that I think that you can't be fooled by we had a good year. If you lack stars, you're not going to win consistently year in, year out. You know, it's just not going to happen. You might pop one year, but there's a bigger thing here, Pat. I'd like your perspective, because I'll compliment you. You're one of honestly, the few reporters, including myself, that's unemotional about your reporting. And that is not easy to do in this day and age. You are straight down the middle about your reporting. And I think Jed has put himself in a difficult position trying to compete and rebuild at the same time.
Yeah.
They stripped it down in 2021. Usually, I mean, they really stripped it down. Usually that'd be followed by a couple 100-loss seasons. And the big part of that is giving runway to young players.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Canario has no runway.
Yeah.
Pete Crow Armstrong is getting some runway, but it's not the 500 plate appearances, no stress situation.
Yeah.
You know, and so what's going to happen as Matt Shaw comes up, as Owen Casey comes up? Are they going to a youth movement, which is going to be 1 step forward, 1 step back, 2 step forwards, 1 step back? Or are they going to do something else? The way you can incorporate young players into a competing lineup, is if you're the Phillies. You just have this massive talent base, massive leadership, and you can bring along whoever, Bryson Stott or someone, or Alec Bohm. Alec Bohm is now an all-star.
Yeah.
So this is Jed's in a tough spot here because he didn't really rebuild. He tried to compete and rebuild, and that's tough.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it again. Like, and that's kind of, I wonder, like, where is Tom Ricketts in all of this? I mean, we were there this weekend, and I think each crowd began with either a 39 or a 40. The team is still kind of creating that perception of being in the race, like they're not out of it yet. And I think this is what Tom wants in terms of every year having a chance to be competitive. And, I think it's funny, the Arizona Diamondbacks, seeing them, it's like, oh, you just need to win 84 games and sneak in. It's like, well, that's a really good team that's handled the Cubs like all the time. I don't think you can just like expect your team to be like Diamondbacks. They have some really dynamic players, some great pitchers. They have some resourcefulness that you've seen, up close more than I have. And so, yeah, I think I'm with you, man. I think it's hard to incorporate those players. I think that's kind of why Jed hasn't moved some of them, is because I think deep down he thinks like their best runway could be that like 2026 to 2030 or whatever. But that's also, at that point, he will have been a Cubs employee for like decades, and that's just a hard sell in a big market. So I think, yeah, it's super tricky there. And I also like don't think it's that far off either. Like, I'm not a homer. I'm not like a super optimistic Cubs person, but their pitching's really good. If you have that you can kind of figure things out. And I think if you add that big hitter in the middle of it, but no doubt, like, why did you draft the Matt Shaws, the James Triantos types? Like, where are they going to fit? And they're going to need a lot of time to figure things out. And we don't know where Christopher Morel's going to be, but he certainly hasn't like passed this audition. They probably, in hindsight, and I was the guy who said you should probably just see what you have. Probably should have moved him last offseason.
And I'll just go back to what I said before. And you probably should have just said, look, we're going to do the best to win, but we're going to let Morel be himself for 500 plate appearances and not worry. And same thing with Pete Crow. That's what I'm getting at. Like, it's not easy to break into the big leagues and just, catch fire on a competing team unless there's an unbelievable support system there. And there really is not in a lot of ways compared to other top teams. So I just think it's now become an even more difficult task. That third wild card has people thinking differently. Maybe I can't compete and rebuild at the same time. And there's an aspect of this I know you agree with. It just, you said 38,000, 40,000. It's not like Jed or Tom walks the stadium and gets booed. It's not like the players get booed. I mean, it's not really that tense in the press conference room other than yesterday or in the locker room. Like, I just think we both have experienced situations where there's wholly underachieving teams. It's a little bit more tense organically.
Yeah.
And, I think that plays into sort of, I know it's a cliche. Oh, ownership doesn't care. There's 40,000 there, but it's human nature to be like, you know what? Okay, we'll get there eventually. Things are okay. Our farm system rankings are good. We're still filling the stands. We'll be okay. It's different if your life is hell, because the media and the fans are all over you. So, this, you coming from the East Coast and everything. So anyway, that's just kind of some of my rambling thoughts there.
No, there are two final topics that I wanted to get you on. You mentioned there's obviously Bad Take Jesse, which is hilariously overblown on social media. But I wanted to ask you about Counsell because you actually, among the people who cover him every day, know him probably better than anyone. I mean, you were in your capacities at ESPN, including being, like a sideline reporter in his dugout during the playoffs. Like, what has he matched your expectations? Because I think he does have an edge. He's very focused. He's actually a lot more, like, I would say, humorous than people would ever see on TV. Like, but I just thought there'd be a little more of that kind of tension there throughout. And I'm just curious your kind of broad takeaways on Craig in his first year in Chicago.
I'll put it simply. It feels like he's been observing a lot,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It doesn't feel like there's a lot of drivers of that bus in there right now. And that includes Craig in a lot of ways. He doesn't have any of his own coaches. He didn't know Ryan Flaherty, even though he hired him, but didn't have any relationships there. Just getting down those relationships with the front office, which he probably will have a bigger part of this offseason. I don't know if he's taken the full year to kind of observe and then put his fingerprints on the whole organization a little bit more. But I felt like he has not pushed a lot of buttons that maybe you saw in Milwaukee, getting the most out of the least. Now he has much more payroll to work with, much more on paper talent, even though that may not be true. So that's, I never covered him daily. So there is a difference. I didn't know him. I just know his personality, and his personality does match. He's kind of buttoned up, though. In different settings, he's fun. He's he can be sarcastic. But I thought he put his fingerprints more on the team, and that could manifest itself in a lot of ways. And frankly, of course, there's behind the scenes stuff we don't see, but we see the results, and the results aren't very good.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with the evaluation here. And that, sometimes you come in the first year and, you trade DJ LeMahieu for whatever that trade was. Ian Stewart.
Ian Stewart.
Yeah. So I get that part of it, but I think the other part is very important, what you mentioned, of just the I don't think there are bad dudes in that clubhouse. I think they all work hard. I think they're very prepared. Like, I think they're into it, but it's also impossible to watch this team and think like, oh, this is like great chemistry, like the best possible mix. And I feel I may have overreacted in hindsight with some of the Madden Theo Raw stuff of just the idea of a hangover. Like, sometimes it just is a matter more of talent than anything else. But what is your vibe walking into that clubhouse every day? And like, how do you kind of turn up some of those things if there are things missing?
So I really want to run this by you because you were here for the last run.
Mm-hmm.
And take away 16 when they won it. Just forget that for a moment. But it really feels in some ways like 18 and 19. You just said it. There were not bad guys in there. There were likable guys enough individually, likable guys now. But by 18 or 19, for whatever reason, probably because they had won in 16, they weren't all position players. They were not on the same page.
Yeah.
They just weren't. And for some reason, it feels kind of similar. Doesn't mean the camaraderie's not good. Just something isn't flowing, isn't working in the same way it didn't work in 18 or 19. Different names, different lineups, and different expectations even. Like, that team was supposed to really, but within their bubble, within each bubble, it feels similar. I can't put my finger on it. It could be partly a lack of leadership in some ways. I don't like the phrase, "Oh, they're all leaders." That if they're all leaders, you don't have 26 leaders. No, that means you don't have one.
Yeah.
And by 18 or 19, position player wise, there was a lack of leadership. I think you would agree.
Yes.
And last point, when your best leader is your highest paid player at the most important position, arguably on defense, shortstop, and he's having such a bad year, that probably is going to create a leadership void. Even though Craig says you should be a leader no matter what you're doing, you know how it is. You can't be having this bad of a year and get in someone's face about their base running or something. So I think Dansby having the year he's having, I don't know this for sure, is probably impacting some of this stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything. I just, like I said, from that prior experience, like how much of it is, I guess it's maybe just the blame game that's going to be going on at Wrigley Field over the next several months here of like, was it, not enough talent being assembled? Was it not managed and coached up properly? Are the players just the mix just off in a certain way? And I think what I took away from that 18-19 era was I did not fully appreciate them winning 95 games in 2018. I think you had said that, one of Joe's best jobs managing, which in real time did not, really feel that way because of the way it ended. And even in, 2019, staying as competitive as they did all the way until the end was, I think telling once you got some distance from it, that it's not that easy to do. We're seeing it right now. And so, yeah, man, I don't know. We're going to have a lot of one-liners and asides when we're sitting next to each other up in the press box over the next several weeks and months.
I mean, the answer might be back to what I said earlier. It's just really hard to compete and rebuild. It could just be as simple as that. And it's not leadership, but it's not this and it's not that. It's just really, if they had just said from 22 on, we're just going to try to build something. By 24, we might be like, okay, it's still built. Like it got lost in the mess of trying to compete. And, it's admirable, but it could come back to bite Jed. So that could just be the simple answer. As I've thought about it more lately, I feel like that could be it. Because I just see like we want so much out of Pete Armstrong. Like it's not easy unless you're Chris Bryant or Bryce Harper. Like it takes a little time, and you don't have time when you're trying to win.
No doubt. I mean, half measures in 2021, and they kind of overperformed, and then they crashed. And then I think even last year kind of caught them off guard a little bit. I don't think they thought it would come together that way. Certainly not that way with an 8-game winning streak and then 12 games over in September. And so it's their messaging, I think, has not been exemplary. The execution has been a little off here and there, and that's why it's going to be very interesting late July. Jesse, thank you as always for the time and insight. I think we both behaved ourselves and didn't say anything inappropriate the way we do in the press box or at the hotel bar after the game. So thanks, my man. I'll be seeing you soon.
There were no bad takes on this one.
Never.
Tell Spin Rate not to take another vacation.
All right, we'll do, my man. Take it easy.
Okay, you got it, Pat.